wanted to dive right in. And as just a quick visual reminder of how the data comes together, we begin with data that you already have. Our belief is that the line item data that's in your budget is good information, but for the type of business intelligence that we're trying to create, we needed to make better use of the line item budget. So for example, if we were going to talk about trade-off decisions that we might make, our view is limited when all we have is line item information. Although the line item budget is fantastic for spending controls, for putting together a budget, for meeting various state mandates, it has its limitations as well. And so the very first thing that we do, and that you did, is put together a program inventory and recenter the entire conversation, not necessarily on the various line items that you could consider for trade-offs, but on the programs that you offer. And that is the main foundation of all of our work, is what do we do? What programs should we be getting into? Which programs can we do differently? And that is what I'm trying to portray here in this visual, is that the very first thing that you did was you created this list of all the programs you provide, and then attached or associated your costs and revenue information to those programs. So now we have price tags for everything that we provide. A program inventory makes better use of that line item data to understand what it costs us to deliver something at a budget level. The second thing that you did was to then associate what we call results. And Don, this is what you were alluding to in your opening remarks for your strategic plan. In order to understand not only what we do and how much it costs, but how relevant one program might be compared to another, we had to come up with some basis for, well, how would we determine program relevance across the entire organization? And we do that by talking about, well, why do we exist in the first place? And ideally, a strategic plan is meant to describe all of the reasons why you provide a particular program, what you're trying to achieve in the community, why you might spend $1 on one program versus another. It's to achieve these higher level reasons for being that we call results, such as to provide for a safer community, or a healthier economy, or a great transportation system and mobility and infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And in addition to those higher level result areas that come from your strategic plan that help us identify program relevance, there are other reasons why you provide programs, and those are what we call basic program attributes, or other interesting reasons why we provide a program, such as maybe you're mandated to provide it. That's a good reason. And so programs are scored on a scale for degree of mandate, as an example, from we're required by the federal government or the state government to provide a program that's a really high level of mandate, to, hey, maybe there's something in our city charter or in any of our local ordinances that's more of a self-imposed mandate, all the way down to maybe there are programs that aren't mandated whatsoever. And that's okay. The point here is that every program was scored relative to how influential the program is to achieving your results in your strategic plan, as well as those basic program attributes: degree of mandate, cost recovery, overall size of population served, degree of reliance. Do citizens depend on you to receive the benefit of a particular program, or can they get it from another source, be it other public sector or non-profit or private sector? And it was the accumulation of scores, how influential a program is on all of those evaluation categories, that gives us program relevance. There's a composite score of relevance or influence that helped us to prioritize programs one versus another. But another way to think about it is that every program, even if you put scores and prioritization aside for just a second, you have now tagged programs with very insightful information. Take, for example, that degree of mandate. You now have the ability to ask your data set, what are all the things that we do because we're trying to achieve a federal or state mandate? You can now filter using your data set to pinpoint the answer to that question. That's mandate equals 4. I want to query all of the programs that are mandate equal 4, and I will produce a population of programs that meet that criteria. Or you might query, what are the programs we offer that it appears that somebody else is offering them? So that's low on the degree of reliance scale. Somebody else is offering them and they don't recover their costs, low on the cost recovery scale, and they have less to do with the results that we're trying to achieve in our strategic plan. That's a very interesting group of programs. Low reliance, low cost recovery, low influence on results. Let's study those and ask, are these good for a partnership discussion? Might we consider if we're the right source for providing those? So I wanted to simply offer that scoring is definitely helpful to prioritize programs, but it's also very helpful just to learn so much about programs. You've now tagged them with all of this information. And sometime in your future, you might consider we can continue this process of layering insightful data on your program inventory. Another layer might be the performance of your program. So you know what they are, you know how much they cost, you know their relevance versus other programs, and sometime in your future you might want to ask, well, how do we actually know if the program is effective or if it's achieving the intended outcomes? And at the conference, we just rolled out a performance measure module that you can use to pick various programs that you're interested in tracking performance along the way. And we believe maybe this goes further. There might be more and more layers of data that come down the road. Maybe by next year's conference, we will have something else to present. But the way to think about this is that in the industry, whether it's ICMA or GFOA or even National League of Cities, the best practices that we talk about are programmatic budgeting, which in and of itself is a best practice. What do we do and how much does it cost? And Don, as you said, how do we use that information in the budget recommendations that we make? That's what program budgeting is. It's how do we use program level insight to influence recommendations that we're making in the budget exercise. Priority-based budgeting simply suggests that we will use more information in budget recommendations, such as the degree to which programs influence the results we're trying to accomplish, steering resource allocation towards those programs that have more to do with the strategic plan that we hope to achieve, and mining resources perhaps out of areas or repurposing resources to the greatest extent possible out of programs that have less to do with achieving the strategic plan, or at least putting that on the table for questions. And finally, performance-based budgeting is simply using the performance of programs or performance metrics to also influence those recommendations along the way. And I just wanted to give you that reminder for the data that you have as we now move into how do we begin to actually use it in the 4 levels discussion. This slide I will show again on Thursday, and it's meant, this goofy character scratching his head is a PBB community who has implemented. You have the data, you are considering all of those orange arrows are what you might be able to do with the data. And up at the top in that banner is Santina, who used to work on the client side for the city of Rio Rancho, New Mexico, and their implementation, and then came to work for us. As she was reflecting on her experience when she was in your exact position where you are right now, she reflected, she had this eagerness and excitement and enthusiasm to put this data to use, but it wasn't crystal clear exactly what road she might take. It seemed like, if you've ever heard Steve Seaman from our team describe the choose your own adventure path, that's how she felt. It was just, there's so many different ways that you can go. How do we bring some focus to the kind of goals that you might have? And again, that's why we. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So on the last slide, well, 2 slides ago now, you said that the performance measurement or performance-based budgeting, those outputs, the performance measurement stuff is brand new.
Yeah. It's a module in our tools. The only performance measures have been around forever. I didn't mean to say that field is brand new, only that in the tools we now have a brand new module to track measures.
Okay, and that's probably what I'm really excited to hear, because that was weakness in what I'd looked at before. Did you use those off of what they've now outsourced with ICMA, with the CPM or whatever it is called now?
Great question. So we partnered with John Mercer, if the name is familiar at all. John used to be mayor of Sunnyvale, California, back in the Reinventing Government movement, when Sunnyvale was getting a lot of attention in the early days for their work in performance measures. Much of that work became the basis for ICMA's Insights program, but not related. John is now nearer to retirement. He's been spending the last, since the 1980s, collecting these performance measures for various programs. He assembled a library of metrics that have been useful for other communities that he's helped over the years, such as if I'm in the building department and I'm interested in what do other building departments consider interesting for performance metrics, that's what the library is all about, is to either pick specific metrics or be inspired by the metrics and create your own. That's the basis for our metrics intelligence, and then we have a dashboard to actually plug those in.
But the idea is that you're going to benchmark apples to apples comparisons between cities of all over the U.S., right?
Yeah, that would be the holy grail, right? Is if we have consistency.
That's what ICMA have been doing for 25 years. So
exactly, right.
The data definitions, they finally open source those, and they're all available now. They're not trademarked, or copywritten. So I mean, I've been working on that stuff for a long time, probably 25 years, and I'm just saying I love to use benchmark data, but if it's not captured on the same standards and with the same definitions of what's supposed to be captured, what counts and what doesn't count, then it's not very useful.
Completely agree with you. Our philosophy for the PBB community is, to the extent that this is interesting to you, tracking performance at a programmatic level, our first focus is making sure that it's useful to you only. That if I was going to make a recommendation in the budget process, for example, that I need 2 new FTE and I'm in the street maintenance program, then I need to describe how I'm intending to improve the performance of my program to make that budget recommendation rational or convincing. First and foremost, the idea is to use those metrics to tell a compelling story within the city of Lawrence. And then a higher level of ambition is, well, how do we stack up in our performance for any particular program versus another community? I think that is the holy grail. Will you get to apples comparison of snow removal programs or police patrol? I think the jury's out. You probably have a lot of insight in that area.
Well, I'm just saying you could just steal all those definitions. There's 300, I think, that are right now being used. They've narrowed them down, or maybe it's less than that. You can steal them. They've already got 20 years worth of credibility in the data definitions, and then your data and all your members' data can go out and get integrated with what they've open sourced on the ICMA website.
That's awesome.
I understand, but you got to tell your members to use that same definition so that it'll have that. Because if they establish it just for their own use, and then later, 5 years from now, say it would really be helpful to benchmark, they got 5 years of data that's no good.
Exactly, right.
But
well,
get the definitions all standardized right from the beginning.
Yeah, it's totally great point. And the good news is we're so much at the starting line for the metrics. Your message, if you're one of the first communities that is really interested in the performance metric approach, we would love to assemble you. And I think we have just a couple of others who are truly ready to start to talk about that, and strive for that consistency as well. So to your exact point, that it's standardized and that we're not 3 years down the road wishing that we had been standardized, so we can do some comparisons.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hijack, but I think it's an important point.
Totally important point. And that's totally cool. So I was back to describing what in the world we were meaning to roll out for the 4 levels of certification. In whether it was Santina or Dawn in your opening remarks, what we recognize and appreciate is that the PBB implementers, they have similar but different objectives for why they got into this. I'll give you an example. Washington County, Wisconsin is in the state of Wisconsin where the economic climate is dire, where there's an overall desire for less local government. Their ability to generate new revenues is dwindling. They're in a tough economy and they're looking to deal with a smaller budget. Whereas in Plano, Texas, I don't think they have ever experienced a budget shortfall. Maybe, before our generation, but they don't know what it means to be talking about a tool to deal with less resources. They're far more focused on, with the new resources that continue to come in, what do they want to be achieving with that, with the new resources that are coming in. And so they're focused more on level 3 for the results of tomorrow. We have Benicia, California, I'll get to in a second. They are less interested in changing resource allocation. They're more interested in level 1. They wanted a communication tool. They feel like they're trying to improve the discussion with their elected officials, with the community, and they wanted to tell that story better about where their resources are going overall. So we recognize that it's not necessarily one size fits all. So we wanted to describe, well, what does a level 1 community look like? What does level 2, and how far can you go with your PBB data? So I want to spend just a little bit of time. And man, it occurred to me, I'm so sorry, Danielle, I had just been talking to another colleague named Dawn, and I mixed up your name, so I
that's all right. I'll respond to both.
Okay, I'm super sorry about that.
For the rest of the day, Dawn, take it away.
Oh man, you can't see it on this end, but my foot is in my mouth, so there you go.
That's quite all right.
Okay, my apologies. So I'll start from level 1 and describe what we're talking about, and then I'll work our way through. And my hope is at the end of the presentation, you might have one level that really sounds like it's on target for where you want to go. You might have several. It's not necessarily that one has to build on the other. If you set your sights on level 4, you want to talk about regional partnerships, and that is your sole goal. I don't want to mislead you that you have to go through level 1 to get to 2, to get to 3 before you can even talk about 4. They're just 4 sets of PBB goals. So I will dive into level 1 and take them in order nevertheless. Level 1 simply means we're going to use the data to improve the way that we communicate about budget information, about the programs that we provide, how much they cost. We're going to use this data to the greatest extent possible to tell our story in a different way. So you see over on the right-hand side of the slide, Scott County, Minnesota, really latched onto this, and they talk about they wanted to redo their whole approach to the budget message in terms of delivering what matters. And they define that as, well, they use PBB to define what matters, results, or their strategic plan. And by talking about programs and their influence on that strategic plan, that is what the budget means to them. It's delivering what matters for the resources available. Last week I was in Benicia, California, and I mentioned that they have their sights set on being level 1. What you're looking at is a council agenda item. They're talking about cannabis, and they have several things on the table. One is, for the very first time, they're getting into licensing these particular businesses in town, and they had very little insight into how much these operations would cost them. They've gotten started nevertheless, and as council starts to ask questions such as, how's it going? Are we recovering our costs on this particular program? What's it costing us to deliver? How many businesses are popping up? They are starting to pull in their priority-based budgeting information to add insight to that council discussion. So what you're seeing over here, this is their present site. And if you click on I think you have this too, the table portion, and start to search cannabis, which they did in one of their meetings, they bring up all of the various programs that have anything to do with cannabis, whether it was in the program name itself or in the program description, and then centering in on the actual licensing program, they can bring up what the cost of that program actually has been calculated to be. Their reflection was, this is exactly what they were striving for. For anything on the council agenda where program information could add value to that discussion, or help educate council, or make council more used to asking a simple question: what programs do we offer in the cannabis realm today, and what do we know about them? Anything. They wanted to bring that information forward, and it's getting council used to having the discipline to ask. It continues, in their point of view, to keep council out of that level of detail. I was going to say out of the weeds. That'd be a cannabis joke. Out of that level of line item detail. So they're lifting them constantly to programmatic discussion, and that's exactly what they wanted to have happen. They're just getting started with this practice, but their hope, not every agenda item has a program to relate to. Certainly not every agenda item even has a financial consideration. That was not their goal. They simply wanted to make sure if there was a program they could link to or a result, then that would really help council see the value in the data that they put together. Here was one other, and this was maybe less on the programmatic side, more on the strategic plan side of the house. They had an agenda item, and the nature of it was whether they should take state funding, and if there was a matching component to it. But if they took this particular funding, the string attached was they needed to improve access to various recreation and parks opportunities. And so the simple question was, what kind of programs do we offer today that fall into that category? What would we even be wanting to use this money to enhance? And so in this area, they could click on their result that was focused on parks and recreation opportunities. In theirs, it was more in their high quality of life area, and begin to scan and peruse what are all the programs that they offer today that meet that criteria for which they might use this money to enhance those programs. And again, totally meeting their goals for getting this information in front of council and improving the level of discussion during council meetings. I want you to note that in level 1, it really doesn't have anything to do with should we be spending more or less on cannabis or parks and recreation. It's solely focused on, are we communicating with this new data set and getting a point across enhancing everybody's education on what we do and why we do it. And that's exactly what Benicia is up to. So that's what level 1's all about. Well, level 2 then really does get into the discussion about where resources should be headed. And in level 2, we get into the discussion of the PBB blueprint, which is all about where can we free up and reallocate resources potentially, and where can we bring in new resources into the organization, and why would we do it? It's to make sure that we have the money that we need, or the resources we need in general, to fund the new needs for the future. So level 2 is all about beginning to tinker with reallocation opportunities and resource maximization opportunities overall. So a quick review of that blueprint, and then I'll show you a couple examples of level 2. We designed this document or framework or way of thinking because we said, for the most part in level 2, we know that the use of priority-based budgeting ultimately is to allow you to see where you have your options to fund the new things that we have to get to. We all got into public service for a reason. We want to make our cities fantastic, but so often we feel restricted because we don't have the resources to fund new infrastructure needs, or go after a homelessness program, or deal with opioids in some way, or fentanyl. How are we going to get resources to fund these new needs? Well, we basically have 2 levers. We could spend our current budget differently, so make trade-off decisions in the smartest way possible to free up resources to fund our new needs, and/or we could bring new money into the equation. We could generate new revenue to fund those new needs. And the overall hope, or at least the way that we portray it with the blueprint, is that there are many different strategies. This is probably not even a comprehensive list, but we try to focus on at least these 3 strategies of sourcing programs differently, or providing them more efficiently, or looking for rational ways to change the service level in order to free up resources. So we're trying to document what are all of the options we have to free up our current budget to fund new needs. And similarly on the revenue side, whether it's cost recovery, insourcing, or finding other entities to pay us by way of grants, or even ultimately taxation, or generating new resources from the public, what are all the revenue generating means that we have? This is what the blueprint is all about. And so level 2 is focusing on using the blueprint for reallocation and maximization opportunities. I'll show you a big picture. What this looks like over time. This is one of our communities, South Jordan, Utah, where for the 3 years or so that they've been working at this, they've had a pretty flat local economy. They've had only a 1% increase in overall enhancement in local taxes. It's brought in a whopping $700,000, which to them just doesn't go very far. And during that period of time, in terms of the new needs that they've been able to resource, that's new programs that they've launched from scratch, as well as enhancements or growth of current programs, they've been able to increase by 18%. And so the only possible way that that happens is because they've been able to free up resources from lowering service levels where it totally makes sense to do that. So they have a whole host of programs that they've successfully been able to do less of, thereby freeing up human resources and money to fund those new needs. They have found program efficiencies to the tune of another 3% overall. And then in a strategic way, they have found other partners to source and partner programs with to the tune of about 5%, while at the same time on the revenue side, bringing in about 6% increase in new fees and charges in insourcing. What's exciting is that they've been able to reallocate 11% of their current budget and then generate approximately a 7% increase in overall revenue. That's how they've been able to fund that 18% surge in new needs overall. Now, while that's 3 years of incredible work to be able to do that, one of our communities who's more towards the beginning, Littleton, Colorado, they said, 10% resource reallocation, that's fantastic. fantastic. Hopefully we'll get there too, but they wanted to just get started and have some practice. So they charged their departments with picking 3 programs from all of the programs in their specific department's program inventory to apply the blueprint. So that these are examples. For median and streetscape maintenance was one program that they recommended for a service level increase overall, whereas payroll processing, they tagged with the blueprint recommendations for a program efficiency, and you can see the lower cost overall. So in terms of the blueprint recommendations, median and streetscape maintenance is a service level increase, whereas payroll processing program efficiency is a reallocation opportunity. This is what Littleton did. They said, we would love to be South Jordan, but if we can just pick 3 programs and start to try this out and report back to council and see if they can get some practice in this overall effort, that's what they're up to. And so far, so good. It's like, it's definitely a baby step, but we would highly recommend it to you to consider. Actually, the way that they did it, Craig, is departments had to pick 2 programs and the city manager picked a 3rd. So you can do it that way as well, or have departments pick 3. The whole point is, can departments start to give some insight, tag a program with something about its overall future? One option, for any of the programs you provide or that a department provides, is that the recommendation is status quo. There's not a reallocation opportunity. That a department might not see a revenue generating opportunity and the program doesn't really need to grow. That's completely fine. But if you consider that each department has somewhere on the order of 20 or 30 or more programs, the hope is not everything is on status quo, and certainly not everything is on service level increase, that there would be some programs they could identify where they really do want to do less of this program overall, or they see a program efficiency that they might be able to attain, or there is a revenue generating opportunity. The hope is that for a very small percentage of programs, they can start to get used to making a recommendation about the direction that the program is headed. And so we brought this, you can consider this is back in Benicia. They had their cannabis program that overall $132,000 in expense. Moving into a level 2 community, they're looking at the fact that they've barely started to charge fees for their licensing. They're collecting about $9 grand, costing them about $132 grand. So the blueprint recommendation is cost recovery. They really want to finally start to roll out some sensible fees for licensing those businesses. That's the blueprint recommendation. That's exactly what we're talking about. The recommendation is cost recovery, and we want to talk about possibly increasing our fees for that program. Or here's another program in this community. They really wanted to focus on all of the support that staff are providing for their various boards and commissions. So they identified every single little board and commission that they convene and all the staff time that goes into supporting those boards. And their hope is that they can do some service level decrease if they can show the full cost of, here's their community sustainability board and commission. They have various arts and historic district commissions as well. They're simply making the recommendation. They're not free. It does take a lot of staff time. And if we could sunset one of them or meet a little bit less frequently, maybe we can take our resources and put them somewhere else. That's their hope, is they're making a recommendation on service level decrease. So that is applying the blueprint, whether it's on the revenue generating side and talking about cost recovery. We see PBV communities have immense opportunities there. Resource reallocation, our whole point of view for level 2 is know what your options are and where you have opportunities to generate new resources, where you have opportunities to free up resources. That's what we're hoping to do. I'll move into level 3. So far, so good on level 1 and level 2. Any questions on those?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. So level 3 might also be fascinating for where you're headed with your strategic plan. So if level 2 is focused on the right-hand side of the blueprint, where can we free up resources and where can we generate new revenue? Level 3 is about asking the question, well, what are we freeing up resources to do? What are we generating new revenue to accomplish overall? So it's totally focused on what are the new needs that we're hoping to achieve. And I mean, this is dangerous territory, could be. But I mean, the reason that I say that is you never want to have open season, I guess, on all of the requests for increasing programs or starting new programs. But I guess that is what we're saying for level 3. It only makes sense to talk about reallocating resources if we know what the positive benefit is going to be. If we could free up that money, what are we going to get into? It has everything to do with focusing in on those results in your strategic plan and asking, okay, what are the new programs we need to be providing, or what programs do we currently provide that need growth for the improvement of our community? In Thursday's class, we'll make a point that for most communities, we see they are very good at maybe a 5 or 10-year capital plan. They know what the laundry list of projects include for the next 5 to 10 years or possibly even longer, but very seldom, if ever, do we see the equivalent on the programmatic side in terms of if we had the resources, what programs do we need to be launching or what programs do we need to be working our way to have somebody else launch, whether that's around homelessness or something, around climate change. We were just in the city of Denver yesterday, and that's an example of their left-hand side. Their council is really talking about climate change, and we're saying, fantastic, what is the program? What are you hoping to do? Is there a program, or is it more of a policy on ways that you want to design your response? Is it a partnership? Is somebody else going to do it and you're going to incentivize them to do it? What is it that you need to drive a better future? We got into this partly level 3 because one of our colleagues, Eric Keck, Craig, you might know Eric. He was city manager in Post Falls, Idaho, and then city manager in Inglewood, Colorado. He twice implemented priority-based budgeting, and he comes to our organization from city manager point of view. He has this great but terrible story around his use of priority-based budgeting. He had a quartile 4 program. It would have been on the right-hand side of the blueprint. He wanted to either decrease service levels or at least get cost recovery. It was step aerobics, and one of his staff members brought it forward and said, clearly it's low on the priority list, and it's not recovering its cost. So Eric went to the blueprint. He said, well, how far are we off? Is there a fee increase that we could consider? And they said, unfortunately, no. The program serves 2 people, and it's a full-time $50,000 staff member plus the cost of the rec center gym. So if we split those costs for cost recovery, it's like a $25,000 step aerobics program. Probably not going to happen. Okay, that's cool. So better question, why are we providing a program at all that serves 2 people? Let's forget about the cost recovery. It's quartile 4, it serves 2 people. So Eric felt like, fantastic, I have a great recommendation for council. I'm going to bring it forward. We can do something better with our resources than a step aerobics program that serves 2 people. However, when he brought it to council, maybe you already know the ending of this story, it got rejected. His recommendation was we should stop this program. And council said, Eric, you don't understand the world from our point of view. Simply stopping a program, any program, without some better recommendation on what we're going to do with those resources is actually painful. Absent a better trade-off, so if we free up $50,000 and now we can say we're going to use that money to do something really great in quartile 1, only stopping the story at we're going to end the program is actually a loss. it's a political hit. It's negative to the council. And so level 3 communities, I'm simply trying to make the point, are getting, we're encouraging them to get really good at what are the things you need money for which it makes sense to reallocate resources away from something else. And that is, again, something we'll cover in Thursday's class, but how to essentially take new budget requests and frame them in a way, are they compelling? Are the budget requests part of current programs that are a high priority already? Are the new budget requests for programs that are going to launch from scratch? And to the best of our knowledge, they would be quartile 1 or quartile 2. And then we can talk about the resources we need to reallocate in order to fund these new budget requests that are coming up. So that is what level 3 is all about, I think, is perhaps, Danielle, to what you opened the discussion with, how do you attach the budget to the strategic plan? One of the best ways is saying for anything that is requested, an FTE, a line item increase, what program are we talking about this request being related to? Is it new? Is it existing? If we don't know the answer, let's go back and make sure we know the program that the resource is going to be attached to. If it is a new service, we need to venture a guess at how it would score. And if it's an existing service, we need to understand how did the program score, just to get some context around how compelling that budget recommendation may or may not be. And then once we have that information, there are follow-ups to refine that business case. If it's high priority or low priority, if it is related to a Q3 or Q4 program, we might say, okay, it's not automatically a bad request. You might still be able to get this funded, but tell me, does it come with program revenue? So you asked me for a new FTE. It's part of a program that has less to do with results overall or our strategic plan. So does it come with a grant or is it paid for by program fees or revenue? If the answer is no to that, still not dead in the water. Can you tell me, will the additional resource or the funding increase change the way the program is provided so that it will move from a quartile 3 maybe to a quartile 2? It will actually change the influence that the program could have. That might be a compelling reason. If the answer is still no, can we find a partner to provide it? We're trying to come up with every possible reason why it still might in the budget process. And if the answer is still no, that's a pretty uncompelling proposal. We might ask at that point, is there a mandate requiring us to provide this program? Why are we requesting any resources for this increase overall? And if the answer is yes to any of the above, then it's a more compelling proposal to consider. And the idea for quartile 1 or quartile 2 is that we're still asking those good questions. It's not like they're off the hook or that there's a free pass. We still want to know, if we increase the service level to a Q1 program, does it move the needle on our performance? Does it allow us to achieve results to an even higher degree? If yes, that's compelling. If no, let's still ask some of those other questions. Can we pay for it? Is there a potential partner? And so on. So that's what level 3 is all about, is really tying this to budget requests and the future, and adding context for why resource reallocation makes sense. It's to fund new things and try to pursue the achievement of results. And finally, I'll summarize level 4. The most simplest way to think about it is that Lawrence will reach a point, or South Jordan, Utah, in my example, South Jordan could reallocate 10%. They could reallocate another 10% of their budget. They could keep on going to a point where there's nothing left to reallocate per se. Everything is pretty well optimized. There's no more quartile 4 is one way to think about it. And they would just be making one trade-off from a quartile 1 program to another quartile 1 program where nothing is necessarily getting better. They're in an optimal state. You could picture that. And the question would be, is that the end of the rainbow for priority-based budgeting. Is that as far as you can go? And what we've been enlightened to is that no, you are but one service provider among many in your region. And the reality is there are other entities who also have resources who you might be able to tap into. And if we can harness their resources and push them towards the results that we're all trying to achieve, so partnering with the school district or the county or other cities, then maybe we can mount an approach for regional resource optimization, and that's what Level 4 communities are really all about. The simplest example that you might think of is a city providing an in-sourced opportunity, such as what Englewood did, to smaller neighboring communities to provide fleet services. Englewood looked towards Sheridan over there on the left and Cherry Hills Village on the right, two tiny communities who also had fleet needs, but for them it would have cost them a lot of money to get their garage and shop up to standard. Englewood provided a centralized fleet solution to service both communities for a lesser price than either one of the communities would have had to pay to bring their own shops up to where they wanted them to be, and Englewood made money in the bargain. So that's a win-win approach to regional services. Englewood turned right around, and when they considered the future of their fire services, they had the same equation. It would have cost them way more money than they were prepared to spend compared to what they ended up paying the city of Denver for fire services. So in this case, Englewood is the outsourcing entity. City of Denver is the insourcing opportunity to make money. And that's what we're talking about, is who are these partners where there's actually a win-win solution to create. One of the communities I talked about earlier, Washington County, Wisconsin, they took this idea and they said, well, what if we did an initiative to share the services we provide across all of our neighboring counties? And they called it Counties Without Borders. Washington County simply sharing the list of services with their neighbors, and the other counties looking at the list of programs and trying to figure out, is any one entity or jurisdiction more equipped to be the insourcing regional provider, kind of like Denver Fire or Englewood Fleet, or is it an opportunity to get something off of your plate, like if you put yourself in the position of Sheridan or Cherry Hills Village. So their biggest win to date was a merger of health departments across several different counties, where together, without layoffs, there was no cost increase, but because they could eliminate redundant positions in the merger, they could reallocate those underutilized positions to start new programs that neither one of the entities was able to do before. So if you keep carrying this out, the idea is, with your program inventory, is there any opportunity to share with some of your neighboring cities, with the school district, with the university, with the private sector, with the nonprofit jurisdictions overall, to try to find out where it might be advantageous for you to insource as a revenue generating opportunity, or any opportunities where it's advantageous for you to get something off of your plate. That's exactly what we're pursuing in Level 4. There's a lot of examples where we've seen this play out and work pretty successfully. I like to point out the places where we thought that there was no chance that it would succeed, because if it succeeds in this region, then it's bound to succeed where the population is more dense. We were in Moffat County, which is northwestern Colorado, population of like 15,000. And they said, we're really intrigued with Counties Without Borders. We like the idea of program mapping. So they invited their county seat, which is the city of Craig, their hospital, their school district. And in one particular afternoon, Moffat County was sharing the list of services that they offer, looking for these same opportunities I've just described. And their hospital director, scanning over the list, pinpoints laundry services from Moffat County and says, really, you guys do laundry in the county? I picture sheriff and clerk and recorder and assessor. I don't picture a laundry. And the county replied and said, yeah, we have a detention center. When we do laundry services there, we have a nursing home and we provide laundry. And the hospital director went on to say, wow, I just never knew. it turns out the hospital, who has a huge laundry demand, ships its laundry from Craig here down to Grand Junction 2.5 hours every week. They have a full-time driver and a fleet just to do courier services for laundry, spends hundreds of thousands of dollars because the hospital obviously has huge laundry demand. And the reason that they do it is because they just simply did not know that anybody locally could handle the demand. That's what program mapping and regional optimization is all about, is finding out and sharing, here's what we do. Are there any opportunities where we could possibly partner together, and then exploring those opportunities in greater detail. Many of our communities have gone down this path, and this is something, if this is capturing your attention, how could we partner better? How do we share our services and look for those opportunities? That's what Level 4 is all about. So I know we're down to like 5 minutes or less. Those are the 4 levels, and I bet at this point it makes a little more sense why they're different sets of ambitions or different sets of goals for what you might strive for. And you don't have to answer it right now, but if you start to think about the year ahead and your goals, you could answer it right now. The hope is if any of those is really attractive to you, Level 1, Level 2, 3, or 4, that we can help you to go in that direction to achieve what you're trying to do. And I'll stop there to see if there's any feedback or reflection.
So do you have an expectation? You know us, well, we're on our journey. Do you have an expectation of how long it would take us to get to Level 4 from where we're at?
Again, one of the shortcomings of my little metaphor stair stepper here is that if Level 4 was everything that you wanted to achieve, you could actually start there without concern for how you're doing Level 3, Level 2, or even Level 1. It's not that they have to be sequential in any way.
Okay. That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is a solution to some of the hairy issues that we're dealing with right now that are highly political. So for me, there's a lot of things on here I'd love to just drop in under the cover of this is what I want to do and I'm new here. I'm just looking at reaction to faces of the people that have to carry that out here in the room.
Yeah, and Chris, I think so we started this a year ago. I think from our commission, we've heard a lot of kind of excitement about this, and I think if you probably ask each of them, they'd probably point to a different portion of one of these 4 levels to say, I want to get here. And so I think, as I look at this, I think we started out initially using it kind of as that communication tool, as that way to say, okay, we talk about the budget traditionally by departments or by funds, but, that makes it really hard to have kind of some of those community conversations because people want to talk about what it is we do. I don't know that they really care if that's a general fund or a, enterprise fund. And so, I think we're kind of in that step 1, step 2 sort of range right now where I think we tried to have those policy discussions, but we weren't really very successful in getting that dialogue to happen at the commission level. So I think when I look at this, a lot of Level 3 really resonated with me in I don't think we've done a good job of identifying metrics that actually measure how we're performing in our outcomes and our outputs. And so we haven't been able to make that connection yet. We haven't been able to do the benchmarking because I think a lot of our metrics are very unique and defined by us, for us, and we haven't been able to take kind of that step beyond that. So I think that's kind of my hope in terms of where we go over the next couple years. But as we have community conversations about homelessness and about some of these bigger topics that, you know, certainly go beyond just the scope of the city, I see value in this.
Yeah, I mean, this strategic plan that we have with 2015 adopted, right? We're going to redo that in, you know, starting in January with a new commission that'll be either 2 or 3 new members. And one of our incumbents wasn't here for any of that and has no real. She's told me she doesn't have any real attachment to what's up there. So that's going to be a big point, I think. So if we can kind of be doing that process, which will probably take 3 or 4 months. So we're starting to get into the next budget cycle pretty quickly. I don't know. It's like we want to do all at the same time.
Well, I mean, one just off the cuff, with the new strategic plan opportunity that you have coming up, that will, by the time that that's done, and even in preparation for the way that you go about creating it, you could have level 3 in your sight for the long term. That we're going to create a strategic plan that really has outcomes that we're going to create programs to try to achieve or enhance current programs to go after those things. This level 3 is in your grasp when the strategic plan really comes together, and it will provide a lot of focus for how you go about the level 3 work. In the meantime, to continue to hone how you're communicating about your programs, resource allocation, degree of mandate, reliance, therefore partnership opportunities, and possibly starting to get into level 2, kind of like Littleton did, maybe picking a couple programs off of that blueprint, asking some policy questions, trying to understand something about its future in preparation for when level 3 is ready for you. Again, off the cuff, food for thought. If I were in your shoes, I might be looking at level 1 up to level 2 for the year ahead, with level 3 in your sights also by the time that strategic plan is done, and then something around broader partnerships also in the near future, but maybe that's one year down the road or something like that.
Yeah, I think defining outcomes is so essential, and that a lot of things will all happen if we decide that's how we're going to measure success. This is what we want to achieve. This is how we're going to measure whether we are making progress. That will help us define that. I think those communities that got really good at reallocating resources, they are few and far between. That's a tough thing to tell somebody, you know, we're going to, and in this community, I sense that saying no to little programs and stuff is really going to be challenging. So I think we need to start laying the groundwork, like you said.
Cool.
I like the blueprint kind of as a tool. I think it would be helpful to kind of standardize processes for our departments and standardize it for the governing body too, where, okay, we're talking about cost recovery for XYZ program. Here's the analysis we do when we do that, and it looks like this. That, I think, would go a long way with folks because it gives them the tool, but also it standardizes it, makes it easier to understand for the governing body and the public. But it also reinforces these concepts with our own staff, which is one of my, you know, we're going to spend some time just refreshing everybody's memory on how to do all of this in year 2. And so the more we can continue to use those kind of tools throughout the year, I think are helpful. I really also like the idea of trying to find ways, you know, we've tried to, on our agenda template, reference the strategic plan, but maybe the next iteration of that is the program inventory or some of drawing from some of that data. I think, you know, we link back to previous city commission meetings where we've talked about a topic. Well, why not link to the results or link to the the cost information. I like doing all of that.
Mm-hmm. I like that feedback. I mean, we find that that's one of the simplest ways to start to put the information in play is to go to your next council agenda. And I mean, I would maybe even do it on Thursday and see, pick any agenda item. Are there any results that we're talking about? Are there any programs that we're talking about where having some data readily available? And I'm not talking about printing reports ahead of time or making this bureaucratic. Benicia simply had the present site just launched so that if a question came up around recreation or campus, they could just type it in and see, I don't know, what might we learn that would be relevant to this conversation and add to it. Many communities are always doing some sort of cost recovery assessment, and why not bring your data on cost and consider as an opportunity for this upcoming year, there is the chance to do revenue allocation to programs, and you end up with a cost recovery analysis. I mean, that's all they did here is they not only did cost allocation to come up with what this program costs, but they allocated their revenue and the tools so they could see the massive shortcoming. Does it mean they're going to increase fees to have 100% cost recovery? Maybe not, but it's got to be better than where it is today. And that simple information, that data is just going to help you with the basics, fee analysis.
I would think that gives the governing body a little bit of cover to say, okay, public, let's go through this. Do we want to have this program? Yes, we do. Okay, how are we going to pay for it? Are we going to, we've looked for all the efficiencies. We've looked at the top half of that blueprint. Then do we want to do fees? And we do that now. We just don't do it in a methodical way, and I like that piece of it.
Cool.
That's them actually using it to me
Right.
too, which is what they wanted from the very beginning. How do we use it?
this?
Well, here's a way to use it.
Yeah.
They still might not take the recommendation, but.
Yep.
But even if we're
And you're,
with both staff and the governing body, it gives that kind of common language, common set of questions that they know that we've gone through and they can go through as well. So I think walking them through this piece of it in this next kind of iteration, I see a lot of value in.
cool. We'll make sure, I mean, I'm taking some notes. I know Liz is as well. This idea for commenting on programs, what we're calling level 2 and using the blueprint, the simplest way to describe it is every program has a direction. Every program has a future, and you can just go through your list. Floodplain management. Okay, here it is, $21,000. 5 years from now, do you imagine that you're probably going to be doing floodplain management? Yes, most likely. Do you imagine it's going to be done for less? That might be a goal that you could reallocate resources away from it. My guess is floodplain management with the kind of climate stuff that's going on is likely to be, if I were to guess, I might put it in the increase category. Do we have an opportunity to get grants for it or to partner with others in our region to have them pool some resources our way? Possibly. The idea here is we're commenting or we're tagging the program with some note about its future. Other end of the spectrum, boards and commissions. Are we going to be in that business? Yeah, most likely. Are we going to increase it? Is it a new need? Do we need to pour more resources into boards and commissions? Absolutely not. If we're 5 years down the, I mean, we might lose, but if we're 5 years down the road and in Benicia, California, if they're spending more on boards and commissions, that is the opposite direction that they want to go. They want to find out how can we meet a little less frequently and still achieve the goals of the commission, maybe do it a little bit more efficiently. There's no resources we could charge for it, unfortunately. Well, I don't know, maybe. But that's the idea is let's picture it's 2 years down the road or 5. What is the direction that this program is heading? Is it cost recovery? That's the direction for this particular program. Probably it's going to increase because there's more businesses to license. and we're going to tag it with cost recovery because we hope that we can get to as close to 100% as possible. I really like that. And then you can question departments as well. Why do you think this program is going to be increasing? We perceive it the other way. Those are great conversations to have.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for your time. I think this was really helpful for us to kind of have this conversation again. I know several of us are planning on going to the webinar that you have on Thursday as well. So this provides a really good foundation, and I think, at least for me, gives me some additional good direction and a good refresher. So I really appreciate it.
We appreciate it too. Thanks for making the time, everybody. We'll